Through the years of the existence of humanity, many components of it have been evolving as a result of the unstoppable development of mentality and history. Knowing that there are many concepts and spheres where things have changed since the beginning, and most of them can be controversial nowadays because of the mindset many people have that is opposite to the new ideas and expressions that other people approve or feel more comfortable with. These new expressions and ideas about gender and the ways people use language and adjust it to fit into these new notions are also related to the criticism of how certain expressions in English or Spanish do not fit with the new ideals of society.
It's a fact that language evolves through time, and the controversies that happened years ago are still being a topic to discuss. It's important to know why these language changes happen and comprehend the history and context behind them. In the present literature review, we research queer theory and feminism related to language. Both topics concentrate on how people communicate in an androcentric way. The way we speak is used to minorize other gender people. Our research focuses on non-binary language or inclusive language as a way to incorporate people. Gender binarism. The first notions of gender by John Money, where he stated after studying the hermaphroditism that gender is a result or it is conducted by the education, as a male or female, and the social environment, and not only by the biological sex assigned at the moment of birth. Therefore, you might think, what does it have to do with all of the language studies? Well, the existence of the concept or idea that there are just two genders, male and female, and everyone must fit into one or another, it is called gender binarism, where the male gender has been historically related to objectivity, thinking, and outwardness, and being strong, and on the other hand, femininity, that has been historically related to inwardness, being fragile, subjectivity, and feeling. Things that also have been placed in a lower side of the hierarchy as the result of this androcentric society. This androcentric society has also affected the way that language has been used through history, positioning the grammatical masculine as a neutral term in most of the context, and the neutral measure. For example, when we say the man to refer to the human race, or the humanity in general. Impact of the gender binarism. This gender binarism has quite a lot of consequences, such as gendered bathrooms, gendered clothes, even gender colors, where blue is associated with men and pink is associated with women, but also has perpetuated certain stereotypes, like believing that the woman's labor is inside the kitchen by a boy and toys related to that to girls, or that boys should be extreme and fearless. In the linguistic side, the use of gender labels to categorize children into stereotypes, for example by saying good girl or bad boy, reinforces a role or certain behavior to their gender, and also that they must fall in one of the two genders that society has gave to them. In the case of the Spanish, the consequences of gender binarism are more recognizable, since most of the words are gender, ending in O if they refer to male and A if they refer to female. But many words that are supposed to be generic are in a masculine form, ending in O. Giorgio Pirisinotto, in a research, find out that the masculine form of certain words that can also integrate women and being used on them, for example, words like trabajador, ingeniero, illicit images associated just the male sex, because these leak seems historically have been related and associated to men.
Okay, how do we define queer theory? The easiest way to define and explain the queer theory is related to the group of ideas about gender and human sexuality, but also the connection between identities and orientation. Essentially, this is not related to natural human biology, and also the social construct may depend on each society. On the image, we have a lot of concepts that can also help us to understand what is related to queer theory. For example, the gender identity, the gender expression, sex assigned at birth, physically attracted and emotionally attracted. According to the Encyclopedia of Activism and Social Justice by Gary L. Anderson, the idea of queer theory is attributed to Teresa de Lauteris in the year 1990s at a conference held at the University of California at Santa Cruz. According to Anderson, the original intent of the concept queer theory was to find a theoretical way out of the dilemma between liberal pluralism on one hand and the deviance of it on the other, but nowadays it has remained queer theory's conceptual core. Now, also according to the Encyclopedia of Activism and Social Justice by Gary L. Anderson, although de Lauteris was the first person to use this term, she stopped using the concept due to the marketable use that academics started to apply to this concept during the 90s. Anyways, the queer theory has evolved into a very important work for the LGBT plus community and history. Another interesting point related to the queer theory is presented in the book Teoría Queer y Psicoanálisis by Javier Sáez in 2004. To clarify his point about the queer theory, Sáez makes an important distinction between the two concepts that compose queer theory. According to him, traditionally in the field of epistemology and philosophy of science, he understands the term theory as a corpus of knowledge articulated in a systematic way to explain a given object of study. In this sense, we talk about quantum theory, systems theory, or relativity theory, for example. The concept of the theory is understood within the framework of science discourse, which raises the need for a method, formal language, and clear rules of transformation of statements that avoid misunderstandings, verification of propositions. Now, having in consideration the point of view of Sáez, we can say that it is true. There is not only one way of being queer or part of the LGBT plus community. Everyone can have their own perspective of sexuality, identity, or orientation, and it is valid and respectable as the conventional identities in the spectrum of being queer. But also, knowing this, it is important to remark the idea of the variety in terms related to feminism and queer theory, not only the social and cultural topics, but academical such as the language and the history of these people.
Feminism and language. It's important to know where started this preoccupation or discomfort of women about language. This started in between the 70s and 80s with the second wave feminism. This wave focused on political, social, and cultural equality for women. Meanwhile, the first wave feminism concentrated on women's right to vote. Two feminist writers, Simone de Beauvoir and Betty Friedan, promote the second wave feminist movement. In her book, The Second Sex, Beauvoir describes definitions of what it means to be women and how we have been treated in second place behind men in all human history. On the other hand, Friedan, with her book The Feminine Mystique, describes what role women play in society and shows the discomfort of women about that. A phenomenon happened due to this. It's called feminist language planning or feminist language reform. Feminist language planning. This occurred in the middle of 1970. Feminist linguists began to consider a relationship between language and gender. The result of those investigations was that language contributes to gender inequalities. feminist women start to realize that there exists an asymmetrical treatment of women and men. A big example of this is the use of the he as a generic pronoun and masculine noun in the representation of whole humanity. Meanwhile, women are the invisible or the marked one, as what happened in honorific titles. Meanwhile, the courtesy title for a man doesn't change in any case, it all will be master. For a woman, it depends if she is mayor or not, giving a feeling of property and power over girls. This means that a married girl is the mistress of a certain man. One example of the success of feminist language planning. Feminist language planning proposed to change those gender differences in language and give women more representation in the way we speak. And the biggest example of a success of feminist language planning happened in Sweden, where in the past there was no word to mention female sexual organs. Years ago, the word used to refer to female genitalia was count, mouse, and even down there. In 1990, this problem caught the attention of the newspapers and finally, before years of fight for equality, in 2006, the word snippa was included by the Swedish Academy in the Swedish Language Dictionary.
Queer theory and feminism not only are related, but they need to be if they want to truly be an inclusive fight for rights. There is sexism in the LGBTQ+ community, just as there is homophobia and transphobia within the feminist movement, and the oppressed in both are queer women. However, that is not the only relationship that exists between them. There is also non-binary language. This language can change among the different languages. In English, we can find it as the use of they, them pronouns or also neopronouns. Meanwhile, in Spanish, it is represented with the use of the suffix "y" and with ella, ellas pronouns. Regardless of the language, the purpose of inclusion remains. It was born among the LGBTQ+ community from the need to express and include identities beyond binarism. But through the years, it was adopted by the feminist movement to promote a neutral and non-sexist way of communication, since the Spanish language is very patriarchal. As is stated by Azul Cordo, the history of humanity is told from a masculine point of view. There is this intricate idea in the Spanish language that male pronouns are neutral, but it is not like that. However, there is a feminist current that is against the mix of fights between the queer and the feminist movement, and not to mention the rejection of the use of non-binary language. Radical feminism, more specifically trans-exclusionary radical feminists, state that the fight for LGBTQ+ rights is a separate fight, and also affirms that gender-neutral terms erase women once again from the language and replace the cis women experience with trans woman experience. It is not possible for both movements to be separate fights because they are intersectional movements, which means the subjects in both have different experiences with oppression and diverse identities that overlap. Even though cis women, non-binary people, and trans women have different realities, the intersectionality of the movement unites us to fight against oppression side by side.
At this point, it is possible to affirm by the literature review that the relations between feminism and queer theory in the context of language given non-binary language can work as many things. For example, as a response to the androcentrism and patriarchal society, also taking in consideration the necessities of the emerging communities, that this can be a proof of the constant evolution and change of language according to the different societies and contexts, and also a most big proof of an essential need associated with the evolutions of people and the language.
Therefore, the study of these linguistics and social events may transform the lives of everyone who is identified with this new way of living and being themselves. As the last point of this conclusion, there is the existence of a phrase that we believe portrays the ideal of the non-binary people, and it is special to think about this new world of social linguistics. Language creates realities, and it is true. Societies, relationships, and thoughts are created on a communication basis that needs to be respected and valued by all.